Hey guys, welcome to the Superversive Sunday live stream. I'm your host, Ben Wheeler, the hostess with. Oh, wait. That joke falls flat with me every time. I am here with Monalisa, Jamie, and Scott Bell. I'm sorry, Jamie, I forgot your last name. What is it for me? Give it to me. Gibson?
Gibson with an I.
Fantastic. Ibsen with an I. Jamie Ibsen. And we're here to talk about the To Be Men anthology, stories celebrating masculinity, edited by a serious métier who sadly had a prior engagement, as happy as that might be. So, how about starting with Monalisa, ladies first? Give us a good description of yourself and what you did for the story, for the anthology. And then we'll do Jamie and then Scott.
All right, thanks. So I'm fairly new to writing, but I've gotten a few science fiction-y type stories in the can, not only with Superversive, but I've made 3 prose sales this year. And I'm going to be writing in Tom Kretman's universe. So if anybody's coming to LibertyCon, you can hear me actually read the beginning of that story. And mostly I write space opera, and usually I throw romance into the works that I write. And but I'm also a firearms person. I'm very much a gun person, and this was something that was very important to me. The idea of masculinity, and also kind of paying tribute to men and masculinity, because I see all of these attempts to get rid of Father's Day and to make men irrelevant, and I think it's wrong. So when this opportunity came up, I just jumped in and I wrote a short story called Cooper for it.
Fantastic. Now, I suppose the question is, are you yourself a father?
Not as far as I know.
Okay. Well, that's all right. Nobody's perfect for this stream. Thank you very much, Monalisa. Jamie, go for it, man.
So first of all, I'm Canadian, which usually puts me outside of the normal military sci-fi circles and stuff like that to begin with. I've been a big fan of guys like Ringo and Korea and Mike Williamson for a long, long time. I've been in the military up here in Canada, and I've been in law enforcement for the last 11 years. So my story in To Be Men is about a cop who is working too much overtime, not spending enough time with his family. And one of the things that you see a lot more these days is a big push to have a better work-life balance. And so the story's called Priorities because it's about the officer getting his priorities in order.
Excellent. Now, are you a father?
We actually, my wife and I lost our son to a miscarriage, and that led to complications. So we've got 2 cats, and there's that whole discussion on, well, are people with pets and without kids actually parents? And I think so, but I know that other people disagree, and that's totally fine.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm glad that you've got some happy cats, I'm sure.
For sure. They're spoiled.
All cats are spoiled. Scott, go for it, man.
Yeah, my name is Scott Bell, and I have publication credits for novels, Yeager's Law, Yeager's Mission, published through Red Adept, Working Stiff, another novel published through Red Adept, and a crime series that's just starting up, published through Divertier Publications. And so that's 4 novels with 2 more coming. So, and then a number of short stories published in various strange places that nobody's ever seen. Except for this one, I'm sure will be seen much more widely. But for To Be Men, my thought process in relation to that was there is often, it seems like in the participation trophy universe, that people think that honor and valor and doing the right thing are participation trophies, when in fact you have to earn those things, in my opinion. And this story revolves around a main character who learns that lesson.
Fantastic. Now, let's see here. We have other authors who showed up in the anthology. Some names I recognize. include Richard Paolini, C.J. Brightly, let's see, Marina Fontaine, John Delaroz. We were going to have Julie Frost on the stream with us, as well as Brad Torgerson, but unfortunately they had Father's Day things to do, one of which was for the birds. But that's okay. Let's see. We also have, there we go. J. Trevor Robinson, William C. Burns, Karina L. Fabian, Michael W. Herbert, and Margaret Lewis, T.L. Tom Knighton, Lloyd Bem II, and I think that's all the authors. I don't think I'm forgetting anyone. So let's see here.
Michael Herbert was on. I think I didn't hear his name called out.
Michael Herbert? Ah, yes. Well, I'll say Michael Herbert.
There's also an essay in this by Megan Fox that kind of goes with the Anne Margaret Lewis story, which is a Sherlock Holmes story. But that's the only nonfiction piece in the anthology.
So, let's see here. How to say this right? Were there direct inspirations for any of you in contributing to this anthology?
Well,
yeah. Monalisa made me.
Yeah, I did. I did. I literally twisted his arm, and he came up with this wonderful story in like a record time. But I knew he'd come through, and he did. He did a great job with it, I thought.
I've seen a funny comic where a guy's like, "Oh, my muse, won't you come to me?" She kicks down the door and starts beating on him until he starts writing poetry. And every dedication is just, "Please help me." That's pretty good. How about you, Jamie? What sort of sparked your creative fire?
Well, part of it was just getting into writing in the first place. This is my first published thing anywhere.
Nice.
I've been, like, as a cop, I write reports every day. Writing fiction is a completely different beast. But when I saw the call for submissions, I went, well, I can write something about that. And one of the things that you come across an awful lot as law enforcement is broken homes and broken families. And so that's kind of the inspiration for both the story itself and the inspiration for the character to make the changes that he does. One of the incidents in the story is actually a thing that happened to me at work. If you read the story, there is a bit where the officer attends a school where there's a young boy whose father is working in a different province, and he never sees him, and he's acting out. And so here's this police officer who has to go deal with this 8-year-old kid who's armed himself with a hockey stick, and he is swinging it at anybody and everybody who comes within arm's reach. So that basically happened to me, and I had to fictionalize it, obviously. But I mean, the officer in the story, he gets bitten on the arm by this kid, and for about a year, I had a toonie-sized scar on my forearm from where I got bit, and the rest of my team, mocked me incessantly because, so Ibsen, do you need backup, for another 8-year-old kid? Yeah. And I realized that, there's an awful lot of stories that happen to law enforcement that you would never believe, because they're too far-fetched, right? And so a lot of that stuff, I just kind of rumbled all together and came up with something, and I sent it in and got word back that, hey, this is pretty good. The main character is a veteran of the Canadian Forces as well. So I was able to talk a little bit about that. So it's a mishmash, right? Like, it's not me in the story, but there are pieces of me in it because, as my first thing ever, they say write what you know, and so I'm still figuring that out.
I mean, my first published story was me being kidnapped by an alien, thrown back 10,000 years, and then trying to figure out whether I was saved or not. Still saved, of course. You know, so I understand what you're saying entirely, and it's very common and very acceptable. Did you enjoy your experience writing this?
Oh, for sure. You know, I've written a bunch of stuff down. I've submitted almost none of it, but this was my first proper submission where I properly heard back, and it was a yes. So that was huge for my self-confidence. You know, I've got other things in the works, but you know, the idea that people are interested in what I have to write down is gratifying. It's awesome. So you know, I appreciate, you know, the opportunity to be part of the anthology. It's a great anthology, and it's got a lot of great stories in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly once you have something, Superversive Press is always looking for new authors. Let's see. Sorry, someone tried to contact me. Talking about fathers and fatherhood in general, I would say that my father inspired in me the work ethics and some other less savory things, but mostly the work ethics that are required for me to labor at books, to edit, to create new wonders. Like my mother, very much on the imagination, the hey, read this, read this, read this. Here's how we think about art. But I would say that my father gave me the religious aspects of myself and the work ethics. Let's start with Scott this time. Scott, tell us about your father and how, if anything, helps you. His memory may or may not help you with your writing techniques and styles and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. The fact is, as a child, I was not a reader, let alone a writer. I couldn't bear to crack a book, especially if it didn't have pictures in it. So, you know, I went through much of my early years just not understanding what books are about. And my father finally, he gave me a copy of a Conan the Barbarian story from a bookstore, from just, you know, one of those off the shelf, off the grocery store shelf type things. And from that moment on that I cracked Conan the Barbarian, I was hooked on writing, hooked on reading, excuse me. And just that that spark was what it took, and he had the right answer for it. So, and being a lifelong reader himself, as my mother was as well, I think that that really helped get me along the path of starting to not only to read, but then eventually to decide, hey, you know, I can do that. It's like anything. I start out, it's like, you know, hey, I can rebuild that carburetor, no problem. Let me get at it, and then, you know, 8 months later, it's still a mess. Or, you know, hey, I can fix the plumbing. Sure, no problem. You know, I just dive in and I get started on it. And that's what happened with the case with writing. It's like, you know, hey, I can do this. And then, you know, several years later, I find out that maybe I can do this. We'll see. But I credit my father especially for the initial impetus to get into the written word.
Excellent. I will say, you're talking of Conan the Barbarian being given to you. It does jog my memory a bit. While my father was no great reader, he did give me his childhood copy of Tarzan of the Apes, which is very good. Jamie, give us a good word.
Well, both my folks are writers in one way, shape, or form. My mom has her MBA and did a lot of business writing and stuff like that. And my dad does copyright advertising. So they both knew a lot about writing. And so when I would go and do creative writing exercises in high school, I would have to do 6 or 7 drafts, and they would run through red pens like nobody's business until it was good enough. And as I got better, I would have fewer and fewer red pen marks and fewer drafts, because I would start to realize what kind of mistakes I was making. So that was a huge help for me. My dad is also old school, basic Dungeons and Dragons 1970s era geek, and when I was growing up, he had a shelf of all kinds of classic sci-fi. My introduction to Mil SF was Starship Troopers and the Forever War. He had Dorsai by Gordon Dixon. He had a whole bunch of Spider Robinson stuff. And so when I started exploring Dad's bookshelf and started reading these books and going, this is really cool, that got me keen. And I still have this memory one time of sitting down at the kitchen table, and I was asking Dad about his little miniatures, right? And these were like the old school pewter miniatures. And he had oil-based paints that you had to stir with a toothpick to get them to break up again. And he's like, well, this, it's this game that I used to play, before you came along with my buddies. And I'm like, well, what is it like? And he just started riffing. He's like, well, you and your party are coming through the woods, and then you come across this clearing, and here's what you see. And as he's describing it, I can see it in my head. And I'm going, this is the coolest thing ever. Obviously, it's the geekiest thing ever, but it was kind of that interest in fantasy and in science fiction that I've had basically my entire life now. And I've read my whole life, and it's only now that I've started to say, well, you know what, maybe I can put words on paper and have it actually, be worth something. So, I credit my dad for my interest in fantasy, my interest in science fiction, and both my parents for getting me off to a really good start on the writing front.
Excellent. Sounds good. We'll have you chanting one of us around the circus table soon. And if that isn't an obscure reference, I don't know what is. Monalisa, how about you?
I grew up without a father. I actually was quite primed and set up to be one of these third wave feminists that hated men and everything about masculinity. But I think the thing that saved me actually was all the time I spent at the library reading Heinlein. And I wasn't just reading it, I was teaching myself English in the process. So I would go to the library and I would grab these juveniles and I would translate them. So they were written in English, and I had my dictionary and I would translate them. That's how I taught myself English. And in a lot of ways, he was my intellectual father. And a lot of these characters that he wrote, both male and female, were far more real to me than my life, because my childhood was so horrible. And I was very, very fortunate to have instead also some relatives who were the previous generation. So they would have been the equivalent of my grandfather. He was actually my great uncle, who provided a positive role model. And when we emigrated and left Romania, he stayed behind. So I lost the only positive male role model in my life. And I didn't find another one until high school, when I joined junior ROTC, and Colonel Conger took that place in my life. And so throughout my life, I've been very, very fortunate to have met a lot of wonderful men who have convinced me and given me reason to believe that men are a force for good. And that's been a saving grace, I guess. It kept me from becoming one of these bitter, angry harpies that think that just because one guy, or even more than one guy, was mean to them, that all men are evil, or that all men are bad.
I'm glad that your story seemed to have a happy ending. And I think that this anthology will be a force for good in that way, and spread the good word of good men. Let's see. I'm always thinking up questions on the fly for you guys. I know that. Have you guys read other people's stories within the anthology?
Yes, I have. Scott has.
Scott, how about, besides your own, of course, what's your favorite story in the anthology?
Well, since Monalisa's on the line, I have to say it's hers.
Look, she can only stab you so many times.
Yeah, that's true. No, actually, I say that jokingly, but the truth is, it is a terrific little story, and it's from a very, very unique point of view. Something you won't see every day. I won't give it away, but it's definitely a unique point of view, and it's a good story. I really enjoyed it. Also enjoyed Mike Herbert's work. That's why I mentioned him earlier. And in terms of, he's also freshly published in this anthology. These are his first published works, and I've always, I've had the joy of being able to work with him early on in his writing career. So I've seen it sort of grow and develop, and I really enjoy those stories as well. So those are my top three.
Excellent. How about you, Jamie? Did you read any of the other ones yet?
Well, I read Cooper, the first one in the story, which is the one that Monalisa wrote, and I'm not clear. Scott, is it your story? Is the second one up?
That's correct.
Okay, so those are the two stories that I read, and then I missed like the middle 16, and then mine is basically the last fiction in the work. So, I mean, the two that I read are fantastic. Enjoyed them very much. It's such a diverse group of settings, I guess, right? Like you can literally take a story about masculinity or fatherhood or both and plunk it into any genre. And thinking about what I wrote, and then even just comparing it to the first two that I read, I'm going, people could literally go anywhere with this. If you enjoy good fiction, there's going to be something in here for you.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of genres that are in this. There's science fiction, there's military science fiction, there's historical. One of my favorite pieces is Julie Frost's Man-Made Hell, because it's science fiction with a werewolf on a mining colony, on an asteroid. And
it writes itself.
It does. And she's a very, very skilled writer, and she makes this werewolf character just come alive, and you really, really feel for him. And I don't want to give away the ending, but it was a fantastic piece. And I'm partial to science fiction. But I never found myself to be a Sherlock Holmes fan until I read Anne Margaret Lewis's The Affair of Miss Finney, which is a story about rape, about how Sherlock Holmes ends up dealing with a rape. And what was interesting about it was that when Arthur Conan Doyle was writing, it was not something that could be written about. It was outside of the parameters that would be acceptable.
Completely taboo.
Completely taboo. And now that Sherlock Holmes is in the public domain and other authors can write those characters, we're no longer constrained by that taboo. And she did such an excellent job, not only with the style of writing, it reads as if Doyle had written it, but also in the way that it deals with this horrible crime, and in the way that it makes Sherlock, because Sherlock is a little nuts. We're never in his head for a reason, yet he finds a newfound respect for women, and that it just, even talking about it right now, it gives me goosebumps. Michael Herbert, like Scott mentioned, I believe this is his first publication too, dealt with two very tough subjects as well. He also wrote one story about rape, and then another one about defending a gay sailor. And he just has a wonderful storytelling voice. A wonderful author voice. And I really enjoyed both of those pieces. And Karina Fabian's little story about the noir style detective reminded me of Bright. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's out on Netflix, I think.
With orcs and everything else.
Yes.
Like that. It's worth it.
It's got this noir style detective story with dragons and fae, and it was again one of those unique things about speculative fiction, science fiction and fantasy, and that just kind of, you know, it was great. And then Scott always has a wonderful voice, and he knows I like all his stuff. So
all this supernatural and science fiction stuff reminds me of the book Ada Cancri by Russell May, where Legion, the demon, takes over a mining colony and starts spreading demonic possession throughout the solar system. It's a good read. I'm always glad when I hear that these anthologies and magazines and stuff like that Superversive Press puts out seems to find all these great new authors. And myself included, I've benefited from this when I published in back when Jason Rennie was doing the Sci-Fi Journal. There's also David Halquist and a few others. And I hope to see more from Michael Herbert and other people here in the future. Let's see. I've been enjoying the cover of this book. Let's see. I don't think... Did Sirius Metier say anything about how this statue was chosen? I think it's Atlas holding up the world, isn't it?
It is. Dawn Witzke, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. She's the one that did the cover for this. And yeah, that's Atlas holding up the world. And if you look at all the little pictures that are inside of that globe, they're all about men and masculinity. You've got all the manly virtues like courage and fidelity and chivalry, because you've got knights and astronauts and firefighters and cowboys. So I think it was meant to be symbolic in that men hold up the world, which I think kind of goes with the theme of it. Oh,
absolutely. I thought it matched perfectly. And it's very dramatic besides.
I like it. It has, because I think it's very hard to pick for an anthology that's as diverse as this one, a cover that screams a particular genre. Because all the genres are here. I mean, there's science fiction, there's fantasy, there's contemporary, there's historical. And how do you put all those into one cover? And I think they did best.
Oh, it's pretty good. I'm just trying to figure out. There's this one guy with like a halo around his head. He's bald. I don't know who this is.
Well, if he's bald, it's probably me.
Not that I know you from Adam, but you know what? I'll take you at your word.
No. I just want to mention one thing. I mean, this even though this is about men, it certainly does not try to portray male as superior in any way. So just if anybody has that, oh my gosh, this is going to be women bashing or anything of that nature, that's not the case of this anthology at all. But I have seen some knee-jerk criticism that has felt like we were trying to be men's rights advocates and that type of thing. It's just not the case.
I agree. There is nothing misogynistic in any of the stories here, and it is exactly what the subtitle says. We're just celebrating masculinity.
Liberals have or lefties, social justice warriors, whatever you like to call them, they have a very damaged view of masculinity, and they fear strength, and they fear someone over them that is personal and direct and forces them to hold them to account. I've noticed this with anything from weak men to women to anything like that, where they count it strange when standards are being held to them and something is expected of them. I can only hope that things improve for us and our authors and our readership as more stories like these are published. I know let me, if you don't mind a little tangent here, I'm very tired of seeing like steampunk novels and stories and all that jazz, where it's like a girl on the cover, it's a girl main character, and then like the guys aren't quite there. Like it doesn't do anything for me. when I look down the Amazon lists. And I hope that in that genre and other genres, that we continue to see stories like this. I know I wrote Sheik of Mars, which is a masculine story about a guy trying to get his kidnapped wife back from the tyrant of Mars. There's military sci-fi, which is always très masculine. The Galaxy's Edge is just excellent. You said you were writing for Tom Kratman's world. Are there any favorites, pinnacles of masculinity in literature? Besides, I'm going to make it hard. Besides things like Princess of Mars and Conan and Tarzan, making it hard for you. What speaks to you as the pinnacle of masculinity in literature?
I don't know that I seek out. I'm going to go look for a story that does X. Just like I wouldn't go out and say I'm going to look for a story written by somebody of a certain ethnic or racial background or anything like that. I'm mainly interested in good stories, and I enjoy action things like Conan the Barbarian and all of these pulpy stories where you've got this hero doing all these incredible things. But I think that they also have companion female characters that are just as strong, but in different ways. So for me, for example, I enjoy the Honor Harrington series very much, but I didn't start reading it because there was a woman on the cover. In fact, I read it because I thought it looked interesting, and I would love to see more stories with women who exhibit strength that is not necessarily just masculine strength. It seems like a lot of these quote unquote strong female characters are about taking masculine strengths and making them feminine strengths, because the underlying message there is that feminine strengths are less. And I disagree with that. I think women are strong in a different way, but that doesn't make them any less important.
Now, just while the thought's here, I am writing a story where I contrast a few different things in femininity and masculinity in a fairy tale setting. Would you be interested if I sent you a copy sometime later, once it's done editing?
Sure, absolutely.
Fantastic. Jamie, give us a thought. What speaks to you?
People being awesome. Blanket statement. One of my favorite series is Michael Z. Williamson's Freehold series. And the first book in that series is all about Kendra, right? And she flees Earth and gets set up on Freehold and has to adapt to the new culture there. And by the end of the book, she is awarded the highest military honor the military can award her, because she was able to get done what nobody else could get done. And it's an incredibly powerful story. And obviously Mike doesn't pull any punches when he writes his stuff. And then you read The Weapon, and that is about Ken and his special forces team and the kinds of trouble that they get into. I've been reading a ton by Chris Kennedy Publishing. They've got the Four Horsemen universe series that has come out, and they're basically averaging one novel every 3 weeks and have been for the last year. It's been absolutely nuts. And you have Jim Cartwright, who is maybe a tad overweight and a bit of a geek, and just happens to inherit one of the most powerful military mercenary companies that Earth has to offer. And he's like, okay, what now? You've got Asbrand Solutions, which I thought was fantastic. It's one of my favorites in the whole series. And it's all about Nigel Shirazi, who is Iranian, and he has a airborne drop company. And basically his father and his brother and his sister all get killed trying to complete this contract, and then it's down to Nigel, and he's got to get it done. There's the Peacemaker books, which are like a sub-series within the main series, and that's starring Jessica Drake. And Jessica Drake? No, what's her last name? Jessica something. And Jessica is the first human peacemaker, which is like a weird cross between Texas Rangers and Judge Dredd. So she's,
excellent.
Fantastic. These characters are amazing. The universe is wide open sandbox, and the way that they're able to get a novel every 3 weeks to come out is Mark Wandry and Chris Kennedy, who put out the first 4 books. They've opened the universe up, and there's all kinds of other authors writing in that universe as well. And it's just, I can barely keep up with them as they're coming out. So for me, it's not necessarily about, pushing an agenda or trying to sell a message. It's about awesome stories being awesome, and people playing to their strengths, whatever those strengths happen to be, because, there's 1,001 ways that people can be awesome. And that's, really what I enjoy. I like the military SF stuff, because it isn't until, you're thrown into a situation where it's do or die, do you really find out whether you can hack it or not.
Absolutely.
So I'll tell you, this is Scott. I'll tell you that if you want the pinnacle of masculine heroes and strong feminine heroes, there's this guy called Scott Bell who has some books on Amazon now. But to circle back to your question, one of those that I found to be terrific at that sort of thing is not only Robert B. Parker, but also Stephen Hunter. Those two fellows, and they're not obviously in the science fiction genre, more about detective and crime, but both of those folks write men very, very well.
Excellent. I'm afraid I haven't heard of either of them before, but I'll certainly seek them out later. For me, I actually took great solace in the writers and stories of the past. One of the great books I view as, like, not that I could write like him, but I view his book as excellent, is The Count of Monte Cristo. And it's this tale of revenge. And throughout it, you have the main character of Dante. Is it Dante? It's been years since...
Yes. Edmond Dante, yes.
Yes. Sorry. Okay, good. And Edmond Dante, and he's on his quest for revenge. He's lost his lover. He's lost any wealth he could have had. He's been slandered. He's had judges, the evil Judge Villefort, throw him in prison to protect his own father. Villefort's own father. And so he has to claw his way back with the help of this treasure and the adventures that he's had that are left unremarked upon, except by the people he has brought with him. And I find that in a negative sort of light, it's the main character is in a negative light of masculinity, and the revenge and the lust for, and the violence and the trickery. In a very masculine sense, and even though this is all French, you'll have to forgive me for bringing up the French in this conversation. He's contrasted against. I used to be able to name them, but there's Danglars, Villefort, Carcid-Truce, I think his name is. It's something like that, and I've forgotten the fourth one, who married Mercedes, but he is a father. To the man Dante takes under his wing, and he's a husband to Mercedes. Villefort has married again, and he's a father. He's had a previous wife who produces the absolutely too pure for this good earth. Oh my goodness. I need to reread the story just so I can get the names right. It's excellent. Who protects her grandfather, who used to be a Napoleon supporter, and all these things fall apart, and their lives fall apart. through his grappling with the fates that they have set themselves towards. For something much more modern, even though this is like after what I said about the steampunk stuff with the girls on the cover and stuff like that, and they're just like steampunk flavored romances. I love Agatha Heterodyne, Girl Genius, and one of the reasons why I love it is because even though the authoress and her husband are basically trying to throw as many handsome men at their main character as possible, these men are still masculine. They're still like controlling or conniving in masculine ways. Tarvik has a thing for clothing and grace and stuff like that, but Gil is much more like manly, like hauling the engine into the car, and then the car starts flying, stuff like that, covered in oil. There's the Jaeger monsters with their cocky attitudes and also handsome monstery demeanors, and it's just excellent. Though I will say about Michael Z. Williamson, he's a good author, but I was once stuck in a plane with only his fourth Freehold book unread, and I could have done such horrible things to him after that book. Stuck in a plane. Oof. I was a captive audience.
Was that Rogue or?
I think it was Rogue.
Okay.
I was stuck in my seat. It was. Like the first Freehold book was pretty okay in my opinion. I liked how they did it, but I am a sort of person who looks for things in his writing and what he reads. I look for very specific things. Like I don't have a genre. I don't like read all the mill sci-fi there is to read. I read Galaxy's Edge and maybe a Larry Correia or Tom Craven. Not that Larry Correia is like mill SF, but he hangs in those circles. When I have the taste for it, and similar things with other genres. Now, in a negative light, if I were to say that if you wanted to read a book which had all the most negative traits of masculinity, and I'm going to pose this question to you guys to start thinking it up, I would say that Vathek by, I believe, William Bradford is the best example. It's a man who is slaved to his senses, controlled by his evil witch of a mother, and marrying all the wrong girls, trampling over the rights of others. It's just tyranny after tyranny with this guy. Nothing. It is all the appetites of masculinity, all the violence of masculinity, and power too. Like it's not some drunk, getting drunk and giving his wife a shiner or whatever. He is in control of a kingdom, and of course it ends as these tales should end, with him willingly going into hell because he believes that will give him ultimate power or knowledge or whatever he was seeking. Actually, no, his mother was in it for the power. He just wanted to see it.
Well, I haven't read that, but going back to Rogue, the thing about the character in that story is he is a self-loathing, highly trained. I don't want to call him a scumbag, but he did horrible things in the weapon and it broke him mentally.
Yes.
And so then he goes into hiding. He uses his special forces training to sneak back home, where he basically just wants to run a machine shop and raise his daughter. And then somebody threatens his daughter, and he's outed. And they're like, and by the way, this problem you created, you need to go fix it and take out your own guy. And so, yeah, Ken is a really complex, really broken character by the time Rogue rolls around. And so
I guarantee I was not complaining about Ken's character.
No,
it was worth it. Like it was one of those things where it's like, close.
Yeah, no, it goes dark in a couple of places. And just to throw a little promotion out there, there's going to be another Freehold anthology coming out, and that is my second professional sale. If you enjoyed the weapon, you might have picked up on the whole combat leopards thing in the middle of that book. And I got to write the story about the handlers who have their cats and they're stalking the wilds of the Freehold as the UN is occupying the country. And we don't have a release date. We don't have anything like that. But we were joking the other day in our writers group about how, it's got love and romance and patriotism and snuff porn. And so it's going to be a little bit of everything. So
that sounds great. Congratulations.
Right.
So we'll see how it all goes.
Let's see. Scott, how about you next?
The question was books that treat men poorly. Is that what I heard you say?
No. Like, as in a book where the character or part of the focus is like a broken masculine character or a masculine character who is clearly like the anti-man to warn men against being like him.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a great example for that. Probably not in my Goodreads bookshelf, but I think one that sort of popped into my head as you were asking that question was the Jack Reacher series. Only because in this particular series of books, the female characters are always sort of cardboard, two-way characters that are there just to be the support angle for our hero, and he winds up with the same shtick for 23 books now, I think, where he's continuing to wander the country with just the clothes on his back and a toothbrush in his pocket, and right wrongs and be the Tarnished Knight, which is a great character. I love the Tarnished Knight character, but Jack Reacher's getting very old to me very quickly, and I would say to you that I can't even crack one of those open anymore just because of the shtick has just gotten so old. But the worst thing about it is the way the author treats really, I think, the women in the book as much as anything else. They just wind up being sort of there. I mean, women of age. And here's what I would say to that is, in any crisis situation, have you ever known a woman who didn't have an opinion on what should happen? So that's what you get. That's what you get in these Reacher books. So I would say that if I had to tell people what not to write, that would be what I would tell them not to write. Is that don't make your characters cardboard, and God, let them grow over time.
Please,
at least get a suitcase or something, a backpack.
$5 for a good McChicken.
Yeah, right. Something.
There's one of my favorite gags in American Dad is Mind Quad, which is the same sort of thing, except it's a psychic who's also quadriplegic after a military accident, as these things go. And he starts picking up these weird side characters from American Dad so that there's this whole like sideshow within the show. It's very funny. And like once I saw that, the whole wandering the earth, the Tarnished Knight thing, I can't really enjoy it because I always think back to Mind Quad. All right, Monalisa, do you have any literary examples of men who we should not emulate whatsoever?
Bill Clinton.
That is quite a fictional thing there.
Who is actually on the bestseller list with a thriller with, I think, was it James Patterson? I haven't read the book, but I am sitting here trying to come up with an answer other than the little bit of sarcasm there.
Everybody in God's earth, including my dog Spot, has written a book with James Patterson, though.
Oh, really? I missed out on this somehow? Okay.
I lose like 100 books to people just leaving them in airports every day. Every day.
Well, it just gets to the point where things just kind of, mesh together and you're like wondering, oh, was that character in that book or this book? But I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, mostly because if I don't enjoy the character, I stop reading. And it doesn't have to be a good It doesn't necessarily have to be a good guy. Like I don't know if you've watched that Lucifer series that's been out. It turned out I love that thing. I thought initially I would hate it, but I loved it because even though he's the devil, he is a likable character. He's kind of that anti-hero. I'm sorry, what?
And those leather pants. Oh.
Well, yes, the leather pants help. And the same thing with what other people consider to be, I guess, bad characters. I like John Ringo's Ghost. I always have, and I know that's a controversial topic, but
I was wondering when you were going to mention Ghost.
Yeah, I love that character, and I think because he's sympathetic, but again, it's fiction, and this is one of those things that I think is weird that I see in other people is they can't seem to separate fiction from real life. It turns out that Nora Roberts really wasn't raped by pirates. So just because she wrote about it doesn't mean that it happened to her or that she wants it to happen to anybody else. And this I don't know if it's a trend. It seems like a trend because I don't remember it being such a problem, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, that, if you write something that it's somehow an endorsement of it. This is something that's new. And
the endorsement I think is new, but I am personally very careful when I write not to put anything to myself into it. Not that I don't write personal stories at all. I don't want to say that, but I am careful to strain out my thought patterns in case of that very thing. I do not consider an accusation like that very, very good. It's like the Freehold series, which you mentioned earlier, and others. Freehold is if I am wrong, tell me, but I view it as Michael Z. Williams' son Williamson is Ideal Society.
Yeah.
And while I enjoyed the first book, by the time in the fourth book, what really offended me was that for plot convenience, he allowed one of the safeguards that allowed his society to work with all the free sex and all that jazz to fall down, which is the waiting period while they vet you for STDs. I don't know why it offended me so much, but it did.
Well, Mike has said that number one, it's not his interpretation of a utopia or anything like that. The thing that happened in Freehold originally that basically destabilized the entire society was when they took all the malcontents from Earth and just shipped them out in the spaceships that were one-way ticket only, and all of a sudden there was nothing they could do about it. Right? The protections that they had built into place were shattered. Right, and so has intimated that there's bad stuff on the horizon for the Freehold. Even their way of governing, that there's instability there and it's not going to end well.
Oh, I understood that. I didn't expect perfection of it, but it was in the treatment of it. He talked about it, and then he's like, "Oh, I guess it's down today." At least that's how I'm being overly facetious about it, but that's how it felt to me.
On the topic of the whole perpetually outraged crowd, they decide that they don't like a person, and then they seem to go after that person, and they start drawing inferences about the author and their personal views based on what they've written, right? Mm-hmm. And so, my question then is, well, has anybody read Game of Thrones?
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, I think it's called a maxim about give me the man and I'll find you the crime, instead of the other way around. Give me the crime and I'll find you the man. And that's what they're doing. They've decided these people are wrong thinkers, so we are going to start pinning things on them. And it doesn't matter whether they're true or not. Mm-hmm. If we repeat the lie often enough and loud enough, it'll stick to them. At least that's what they're trying to do.
Yep. And I think that we're sort of, thankfully, moving out of the sensitive phase where, you whisper racist to somebody and they start scattering like a cockroach in a lit room. Hopefully, anyway. I will say, though, that we don't know what George R.R. Martin's preferences are when he's alone at night with a computer. I agree that for certain people, most writers, that they do not write exactly what they themselves believe in, that it's not a mirror to their souls. However, I would say that if you showed me enough of your literature without me knowing anything about you, I would eventually be able to figure out your character. I didn't need to be told. Like, first off, I am going under the assumption, because I have seen Michael Z. Williamson talk about libertarian stuff. I didn't need to be told that Michael Z. Williamson, and if he isn't one, you need to tell me right now, because I'm making a fool of myself, is libertarian.
Oh, for sure.
So, like, I dig what you're saying, but at the same time, it was like a spotlight holding these giant glowing words into the sky, that said such and such. And especially when I have to write things that might be salacious in nature, not that I really write them, I always take great care. And by the way, what's salacious for me is tame for other people. That you can't go, that's Ben's fetish. Because I think that's the real concern for a lot of this stuff. I'm not worried, like, when I read this, that Monalisa is some sort of man supremacist, who's just waiting for us to trample all of womankind under our heel. No, that's absolutely ridiculous. But I think for certain things, for things that we desire to see in our books, that we desire to write about, that mirror comes in. Otherwise, we would not have personal writing styles that can be traced to people. People know the difference between an H.G. Wells and a Jules Verne. But we are slowly, but too quickly, running out of time. Let's start with Scott, and Monalisa will end with you, and then myself. Scott, give us your wrap-up phrase.
Read the book. Read the To Be Men. Have fun with it. It's not meant to be anything more than just a good bunch of stories.
Excellent. Jamie, how about yourself?
I think that pretty much says it all. I appreciate being given the chance to take part.
And I enjoyed having you on, and I hope you come on again sometime when you decide to publish your novel, which I hope is coming.
Well, it's funny that you say that, actually, because the novel that I'm working on right now for a micropress that isn't yet off the ground involves like a steampunk aesthetic with a female main character. So we'll see how it goes.
It's okay. I'm basically dedicated myself to writing a steampunk adventure with a male character in it anyway, main character anyway. I'm going to call it Dr. Steam Cannon. It's going to be great. I'll show you all. Ha, 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 ha. Monalisa, give us a good word.
I would say enjoy the stories for what they are. You are going to take away whatever you want from them, whether it's in there or not. And I think that's true for every story, whether it's a novel or a short story or part of an anthology.
The stuff you get out of it is certainly going to be great, I think. I think the stories are going to be entertaining, and the quality is going to be objectively good, or so I hope. It's going to be great, guys. Do pick up a copy of To Be Men at Amazon. Buy it for your friends. It's an excellent Father's Day gift, even if it is a few hours into the day. Do check out my own story, Chic of Mars, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day, everyone.